Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics, back with Foundation Paper Piecing Series 3 for October. We all know that is kind of pumpkin spice season, so we could not resist having some pumpkins, a beautiful fall leaf, beautiful outer border of those fall leaves. It looks like that in Idaho this time of year. And hey, we also enjoy a cute little jack-o'-lantern face. Nothing scary, just cute. But because the applique is prefused and laser cut, if you want to have just pumpkins with no jack-o'-lantern, you would simply leave off those applique shapes that are included in your kit. And we show you an example of that here on the pattern of what that would look like if you decide to leave that off, which is perfectly fine. Then it would carry you all the way into November, right? And of course, by the time we get to December, it's all Christmas by then. So this far into the series, you already know how to do foundation paper piecing, but maybe you're brand new to Shabby Fabrics, and we're so happy you're here. We create content multiple times a week where we're excited to share with you our favorite hobby: quilting, foundation paper piecing, even cross stitch. There's a lot to look forward to. So if you haven't subscribed, do that right now. And good news is fun to share. Let your friends know as well. I love it when my friends tell me about something new I maybe don't know about. I'm like, I'm so glad you told me about X, Y, and Z. So good news is great to share. I'll touch just a little bit on the process of foundation paper piecing because it is very non-intuitive, and maybe it's been a while since you've done some foundation paper piecing, and I'll get you back in the groove. But if you are brand new to foundation paper piecing, what I'm going to be covering today won't be sufficient for you to kind of grasp the concept. Here's the great news. Remember, I said this was Series 3. Back in Series 1, 2, and the first project of Series 3, actually the first of each of those series, I take a deep dive. We're in that video together for over an hour, showing you a process that is not intuitive, but very fun and easy to learn, especially once you pick up the rhythm, you're on your way. So today's just a refresher. Again, if you're new, check out those longer videos where we really unpack every single detail. Kits are the way to go. We've been saying that. Customers are believing us because those kits are flying out the door. Why is that? Everything you want to make this is in a kit, including the pattern. You don't have to be the designer. That's my job, right? To put together amazing fabrics that you can now know when you invest in a kit, your project's going to look just like that. And isn't that nice to know versus you trying to grab in your stash and is that going to look good together, and you don't really know until you made it, and then you're like, oh, I should have used different fabrics. That was my earlier days of quilting, by the way. Many times I was a little bit disappointed. If I could have a do-over, I would have chosen maybe some different combinations. So kits are the way to go, not only because you're going to be getting this exact kit, also prefuse and laser cut applique, but also a tested pattern. We know this is full color. We're showing you the exact fabrics in the kit. So when you get your kit, you're taking out your fabrics and you can say, yep, that's that fabric, and so on and so forth. You can identify that. Also inside our pattern, in addition to full color instruction, and we keep hearing high praise from makers about the fact that our patterns also include the foundation papers being printed on Carol Doak paper. You're not running out to Xerox this. You're not having to go buy Carol Doak paper or some other brand of foundation paper. Get in your car and go drive somewhere to Xerox a pattern. No one's having fun doing that. Makers have fun making, not Xeroxing, right? So we include all of that here. And the other customer favorite are stickers. We all know this is a lot of cuts, very doable. Make sure you grab a fresh blade in your rotary cutter so you can make some good clean cuts. But we all know with the process of foundation paper piecing that once you get all of these blacks cut, or maybe some of these reds, they all start to look alike, and it's very confusing if you don't have your fabrics labeled. So as a reminder, if you're going to be working on the black fabric, make a cut and sticker it in that moment. Don't cut, and then sticker in the end. Cut, sticker, cut, sticker. This is how you stay organized and you make sure you're putting the sticker on the right fabric. So that's just a reminder to stay organized. So what's this business about foundation papers? What's this business about stickers? How does this process work? Well, it is, again, a non-intuitive process, and we'll go ahead and start here with this portion of our pumpkin unit. And let me show you what we've already done. And you can see here the pumpkin, for example, has an A section, a B section, and a C section. Those are made individually, trimmed, which we'll talk about later and we'll do together. And then we're joining sections together until we have our full block. And of course, we're going to make 2 pumpkins. They're slightly different. We have the leaf on the one side, the leaf on the opposite side. And then, of course, we have our beautiful maple leaf right there in the center. So the process that I'm showing you will work with any foundation paper project you can ever dream up. Simple, all the way to the most complex Judy Niemeyer patterns, which are like legendary, right? So this is something that you can carry into any level of complexity. But let's start with a simple little shape here with 4 pieces. And I have all of my shapes in order. That's one of the things I do. I'm working on section C. I have C1, 2, 3, and 4. So I just flow in order. Remember that the fabric, just like we're seeing here, we have letters and numbers on this side and fabric is on the opposite side. So we're going to be repeating that process. In fact, I'll just leave that out for us to refer to. So that first piece, that first fabric here, we have to say, all right, well, we know that's certainly going to be going to that location. If you don't have a light box, one of the things that you'll need to do, you'll have to literally hold this up to the light, maybe a patio door if you're living in a sunny location. And it's very important that for each piece that is added to our foundation paper, that we're not only having the fabric cover the outline of C1 is what we're working on, but we need to make sure that we have 1/4 of an inch all the way around that shape. So that's why this piece of fabric is so large. In my early days, when I tried to teach this to myself, which by the way did not work, it did not work, and I'm usually a quick study, I couldn't figure this out. I kept cutting my fabrics too small because I thought, well, I'm going to cut that shape plus 1/4 of an inch. Doesn't work like that. That's why you want to refer to the instructions inside the pattern and cut the measurement that we have you cut. You'll see because of the angles, you often have to cut the fabric much larger than you would have expected. Now, if you have a light box, as I do here, why not use that? When I make the investment of a notion, if I get to use it again for another purpose, I actually feel good about that purchase. I'm like, I knew I bought this for a reason. It's not just for applique. This is a great way, let me turn that down a little bit so it's not too bright for the overhead. But here, look how I don't have to hold it up to the light, find a patio door, and I often quilt at night. There is no sunlight coming through. I rely on that. Now, let's look at that. Do you like that? Or do you want to have that gingham maybe on point? I don't know. You could really turn this in a variety of locations as long as you have that 1/4 inch all the way around. I like that location. You'll grab just a little bit of glue, and this is the only piece really that needs any glue. We're on the back side of the fabric, and I'm just going to put just a little bit of glue there. So just put a little bit of glue. Don't get crazy. Nothing permanent because you are going to remove the paper later. Okay, we've got a light box. We're going to use that. I really like that angle, kind of right about there. All right, so thank you, light box. You've done an important job. Put you there for now. So we have our first fabric. Now what are we doing? When I was first shown this, I thought, how does this work? What I just grabbed for is called an add 1/4 ruler. This is specifically made for foundation paper piecing. Do you have to use this? No, I do. because I've not found a better tool that does this job. There's a tapered edge and there's a lip. We're going to use both. I lay that tapered edge just to the left of the line, and I'm using it to fold the paper firmly over so I have a very succinct fold. You see that? How my fold is right along that line. If you put the tapered edge right on the line, when you fold over, the fold will actually be slightly right of the line, not the end of the world, but I want to be on that line. Remember, foundation paper piecing, why we're very attracted to it, is the precision. You could not achieve this with traditional cuts on a ruler. It can't happen. That's what makes foundation paper piecing so unique and really truly in a lane all its own. After you have folded that over, the tapered edge has done its job, and we're going to flip this around so now that we have a ledge, and it's going to lock into that fold. I like to slide that right along there to make sure I'm not out here, I'm right up against that. And I'll give a nice cut here. And why is that called add a quarter? Because we just added a quarter of an inch of distance from the fold to the edge of that fabric. I thought they had a brilliant name. Notice we have two sizes of that. Because of the cuts of this specific project, the small add a quarter is probably all that I will need. But in series 1 in particular, there were many times I had a longer angle that exceeded this, and I grabbed the longer one. So you can buy these individual, just get the pair. They come in yellow or pink. Pick your favorite color. You will absolutely use them both. And as I look at some of the runs of this, I think even the maple leaf for this project, you probably only need the short one. But again, once you learn this project, you're going to be off to the races, and you're going to want to do a variety of projects. So after we've made our first cut, we've folded over our add a quarter, the next step will be to add our second piece, which happens to be a black crackle. And I really had a lot of fun choosing this fabric because those leaves kind of get that crackly look. So that's why I chose that one for this project. Now that's a pretty acute angle there. So our job when we place this fabric here is to make sure we've placed it in the proper location, that when we flip that over, we have done, just as we said, covered the next piece, which happens to be, again, C2, but a quarter inch all the way around. You can do that by placing right side together, kind of simulating that and taking a look. And look what I've done. Look how what seemed intuitive to me, look at all this fabric here and look how I'm short over here. Every time you do foundation paper piecing with very acute angles, the location of the next fabric is not always obvious, and you need to check. So I can see I definitely need to move my fabric down, and I will repeat the process of simulating, stitching it down, and now I can see I absolutely have that in the right place, not where I thought I was going to put it, but where it needs to be. I'm going to make sure I have that nice and snug. Now hold that in position, flip it over, and we're going to pin. I don't want that moving anywhere. And where you're pinning is to make sure that you are away from this line. Where are we going to sew? Where are we not going to sew? This is the line that we need to sew on, and we will begin by sewing a few stitches prior to the line, on the line, and you can sew straight off. With foundation paper piecing, remembering that we're going to be removing the paper later, I always sew on a shortened stitch length. And in this case, a BERNINA's normal stitch length is a 2.5. But with foundation paper piecing, we pull that back to a 1.5. And the needle of choice, this is kind of part of my foundation paper piecing kit right here. This is my little kit right here when I get ready to do foundation paper piecing, right there. The size 70 needle is a Microtex sharp needle that I love this needle. Perforates the paper, makes it easy to remove later. So we'll begin stitching just a few stitches before, a distance before the line, directly on the line, and you can sew straight off. So let's do that. So far we've done a trim, We're going to sew and press. So the acronym I want you to start repeating to yourself is TSP. I'm just going to hand guide that needle down right before the line, and let's get started. Okay, so TSP, if you ever forget, sometimes that happens, especially as the night wears on, right? And you get a little bit tired. Like, what's next? TSP. Trim, we trimmed, we sew, we press. I like to do foundation paper piecing and use my iron. However, if you are at a quilt retreat, maybe you are at a gathering where there's limited sources, some people like to use the Clover roll and press to simply get that down. And it's not as crisp of a press as an iron, but it's definitely sufficient for you to keep moving on. So choose however works for you, whether it's the Clover roll and press or an iron. If I was going to a retreat, I would take this with me. If I have an iron, I'm always going to take that. If it's like, I don't want to stand in line, I want to keep going, I'm going to use the Clover roll and press. Decide what's best for you. Now let's double check. We covered our shape C2 without question. We got that in a good spot. Let's look at C3. So we're going to now repeat the cycle. We trim, sewed, and press. Repeat, rinse, and repeat. We're going to just keep doing that. Remember the tapered edge slightly to the left of the line between C2 and C3. And remember that we started stitching slightly before that line. You're like, well, how am I going to pull that paper back and fold it over if part of that paper is kind of trapped down because you started stitching before that? Easy. Make a slight tear. That's okay. Remember, we're going to remove the paper anyway. We're not keeping this stuff. It's okay to rip that. So the tapered edge is slightly to the left of the line. Fold this over. Give a good crease with your nail. Double check you're happy with that location. If you are, looks good to me. Once again, rotate this around. Lock this in. We're going to trim. Now we have our next piece, C3. By the way, these stickers are very sticky still. You could potentially be putting them back on the sheet from which they came if you wanted to maybe make the project again later with some of your own fabric, right? That's fantastic. I like to reuse things if I can. All right, so we know this fabric now needs to go here. We will place that, we're guessing, and we're going to flip and we're going to look, and it looks like we got it this time, right? Last time I was like, oh, way off. Now I like that position. So once again, we will pin. Oh, I missed that. Let me put that right where it should go. Yep. Flip it over, pin. And I can see I can start off here, so on the line and straight off. So let's do that. All right, trim, sew, press. You're like, ah, this is very repeatable. Oh yes, very much so. Very much so. And then last, let's just do that. Might have to trim, rip the paper slightly. Fold. Turn this around, lock this in. Trim. Our final piece. Place in position, flip. I like that a lot. Looks great. Once again, we can start off the fabric from here, right there, all the way off, right? So the process that I've just done is the whole process the whole time. Whether it's section A, section B, whether there's 5 pieces, 20 pieces, 40 pieces, it does not matter. Same process over and over again. And there's something about that that is actually very rhythmic and very soothing. You're not wondering what you're doing. With the complex quilt blocks, you're often having to refer back to instruction to make sure you're doing the right thing. You don't have to do that here. The main thing about foundation paper piecing is making the right cuts and stickering. Then you're on autopilot, right? So after you have this section done, now this thin outer line is where we trim up our shape. Be very accurate here. Grab a straight edge and cut exactly on that line. If you do that with each section of, in this case, the pumpkin, remember how we had 3 pieces, 3 sections, I should say. This is going to click together like a puzzle. We all know what that's like, to find a puzzle piece and slip that into position, how it just goes perfectly. That's what this does for you. And this special notching that we have, and I'll point that out here. See this little notch? That's not an accident. That is going to make this fit absolutely perfectly. Now, you may be tempted at this point, once this is trimmed up, to remove the paper. Don't do it. Don't do it. There's so many reasons not to do it. Number one is the nomenclature that says this side joins to the AB unit. But this line right here is your 1/4 inch seam allowance. I don't have to go find a 1/4 inch on my own. The paper is helping us do that. So you can see we did section C, we did A and B, we joined A and B. We already did that in advance. And notice how we removed the paper in the seam allowance. After you join 2 sections, that paper that was used to help you get the perfect 1/4 inch, it's done its job. Notice how we removed that paper there to reduce bulk, but we left the rest of the paper on, right? Because this has important lines that we want. Here's our section now, and here's this here. Let's look at this. Let's look at how this is going to click together. Look at this. There's no other place for that to be. That's why you're leaving the paper on. And remember, there's a lot of bias cuts happening. Bias means stretch. So the paper is not only providing alignment, it's providing stability. So this doesn't get wonky on you and start to kind of twist and warp because there's so much bias. So that's another reason that we are leaving that on. Now, I also continue to sew these seams with that shortened 1.5 inch stitch length. Even though I primarily use the shortened stitch length to join these because I'm going to remove the paper, I'm still going to remove the paper here, so I'm leaving the 1.5 inch stitch length throughout this entire assembly. Okay, let's look at this. Look at that. Is that cool or what? Well, when I finally learned how to do foundation paper piecing, I was like, this is cool. It's just something that is in a lane all its own. These very unique angles, the precision of it. I just found it fantastic and so fun to do. Now we keep our foundation papers on even throughout putting the sashing on, the leaf, this one, even the borders. Why? We have the 1/4 inch guide to even putting the borders on. Once we have this whole top portion done, then we removed the papers then. Now, remember, we have an awesome applique feature here if you choose to do that. Some feedback that I got from our maker team, they waited till the very, very, very end to put the applique on, and I thought it was brilliant because they explained to me, if you look at the top quilting that they did with the 4-piece thread set here, if you put the appliques on and then did the top quilting, you would have to start here and stop, start here and stop. So they quilted the leaf, quilted both pumpkins. After they had done the quilt top, they layered it with the cali-dell, they put the backing, they did all of the quilting, got all of that done. Then they went ahead and put the applique on. They loaded up the machine with the yellow, and that's when they went ahead and did the machine applique at that point. I thought that was brilliant because my instinct would have been, okay, I'm putting that face on right now, right? Because it's fun. And have I done that before? Of course. And then have I cut my thread multiple times because I was interrupted by the, yes, again. Now you're ready to put that on again. You've got everything else is already quilted, and the final step is to do the jack-o'-lantern face if you should choose to do so. With your applique shapes, simply give a little pinch. Don't be shy about that. There's Heat and Bond light on the back of this. Here, and there's my little nose. This is just visual. There's no layout diagram. Grab your pattern. You can say, okay, I really like the eyes kind of there. I like the nose there. And I like the mouth there. Whatever that is, you simply iron that down, and then you come back with your yellow thread and you're going to stitch that. And that will of course be going all the way through the batting and all the way to the back. And we went ahead and put a darker thread in the bobbin so that we weren't seeing that on the back. So again, that's if you want to do the applique version, which we think is pretty cute. So I know this was a little bit of a longer video today, but I wanted to just, I know what that's like to not do foundation paper piecing for a couple months. And I'm like, how's that work again? Because it's not intuitive, right? As a maker, I'm used to doing right side together, sewing a 1/4 inch and press. And that's like bike riding. You can figure that out with seconds. Foundation paper piecing, a little bit of a different part of our mind. And once we get in the rhythm, we're TSPing, and next thing you know, we have an amazing block. So if you have a friend that hasn't figured out how to do foundation paper piecing yet, share the great news of how fun this is. Maybe do a project with them, because that's what it took for me to get it. I was making a block right alongside someone where they were showing me the fabric isn't where you think it should be and moving it. And then I was like, I get it, I get it. So if you've got friends that don't know the process, share the good news and share the great news of Shabby Fabrics. This is the place to learn new techniques about new Block of the Month clubs and so much more. I look forward to seeing you next month as we continue Foundation Paper Piecing Series 3 for November.